Wilmington Business Journal, as well as the co-director of WILMA's Leadership Initiative, alongside Vicki Janowski, who you'll hear from shortly. She's going to be moderating this great panel discussion with these great leaders that are on stage to my left. Thank you. I want to personally thank you, Judy, Brett, Wanda, and David, for taking time out of your busy schedules to share some insight with our audience this afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to take this opportunity to share some updates about the Leadership Initiative. In 2015 is when WILMA launched the Women to Watch Leadership Initiative with a mission to help develop more women leaders in our community. 3 years later, we have some solid numbers of the women who have participated in the initiative's program since then. So at your tables, each of you should have some flyers there with some numbers on them. And I want to take just a moment to walk through what some of those numbers are and what they mean to the program. So the WILMA's Leadership Institute is basically a 9-month program that women are selected to participate in. This September, we'll close the 3rd year's class of the Leadership Institute, and that leaves us with 42 alums that have gone through that program. We've joined partners with Keynote and the United Way of the Cape Fear area to help women get trained to serve on nonprofit boards and for-profit boards. 273 women have been trained to have gone through that program. We have 82 members in the WILMA Network, and the WILMA Network is an exclusive group made up of women that and businesses that support the Leadership Initiative overall. 940 attendees have attended this Leadership Accelerator over the past 3 years. It's probably a little bit more than that, as attendance was really boosted the past week for this actual event. But so 940 people have gone through some extensive leadership training over the past 3 years with this particular event. Our Women to Watch Awards, this year is our 7th year for that particular program. We've had 1,483 applicants, 175 finalists, and in October, when we announce the 2018 winners, we'll have had 48 winners overall. So we're shining a spotlight on a lot of incredible women in our community. Our mentoring program, that's twofold. We have a year-long program where we have matched 80 mentor and mentees. And we also have group events where 127 participants have gone through that. Our audience monthly is 60,000 per month. We have over 7,600 Facebook followers, 2,200 Instagram followers, and those numbers continue to grow. Lastly, I'd like to leave you with a quote from one of the women that went through the Leadership Institute last year. She was a graduate in the 2017 class. Her name is April England. She is a supervisor and work management support at Duke Energy. And this quote was pulled actually from a presentation that April gave during graduation. And it kind of explained and summed up what she got out of the Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute has been a wonderful experience, and I am sad that it is over. But I am walking away with something that is truly of value, and that is a network of support that I now call my friends, and a newfound confidence that I am the master of my strengths, and because of that, others will be inspired by my radiance. I think that sums up a lot. So we hope you find true value in today's event, and that you continue to grow your network of support or start building new ones. We hope you find inspiration in today's speakers and strength from their leadership. Lastly, we wish for you to meet like-minded people that will offer support, ideas, and a listening ear when needed. At this time, I'd like to thank our sponsors who help make this program possible. Our founding sponsors are Castle Branch, GE Hitachi, Live Oak Bank, New Hanover Regional Medical Center, PNC, and Wilmington Health. And our corporate sponsors are Alchemy, American Petroleum Institute, Atromatos, Corning Incorporated, Megacorp Logistics, My Eye Doctor, New Hanover County, Pathfinder Wealth Consulting, UNCW Swain Center, and WellCare Health. And our supporter sponsors, they're listed on, well, all the sponsors are listed on the back of the program, but the list is so long, I'd be up here all afternoon letting you know who those folks are. So thank you to our sponsors. Y'all please support them throughout the year and throughout your endeavors. So now we're going to hear from two of our founding sponsors. We're going to first hear from Kelly Shout, who is with Wilmington Health, and then following Kelly will be Rebecca Quinn Wolf from PNC Bank.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm so pleased to be here today, and we at Wilmington Health are proud to sponsor WILMA's Leadership Accelerator. I have to admit that I chuckled a little bit when I first saw that the word accelerator in the name of this event. With two athletic teenage boys, a husband who travels, I'm in the last year of my MBA, working full-time. I feel like I have my foot mashing down at the accelerator all the time. I know that I'm not alone, as many professional women in our community, our state, and our country balance the demands of life, often at 100 miles per hour. We sometimes wish that we could just slow down and take a break. Am I right? But it's events like this that help us all from being seen as the stereotype, satisfied with the status quo, or even worse, becoming complacent. Women today are stepping up to provide real solutions to real problems. Women are driving change in economic, social, and political arenas, not only in our local community, but globally. Creating, planning, and acting at those levels takes the ability to lead. Former First Lady Rosalynn Carter, a leader in creating change regarding so many health-related issues in our country, is credited with a quote that I try to live by in my work and personal life. A leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. Become a great leader and take yourself, those around you, your companies, and our world to where it ought to be, better than we could ever imagine. Thank you again for allowing me and Wilmington Health to be a part of this event, and enjoy the rest of your day here at the Leadership Accelerator. Good afternoon. I am Rebecca Quinn Wolf, and I am with PNC, and I'm the Director of Client and Community Relations for Eastern North Carolina. And we are extremely proud to be a partner of the Wilmington Business Journal for really the last 5 years, and proud to be a founding sponsor of WILMA's Women to Watch initiative. It's really been a great, terrific partnership. As you may know, PNC has been a longtime advocate for growth across our company and throughout North Carolina. We have a strong presence with more than 30 offices across the Eastern North Carolina footprint alone, which enables us to deliver comprehensive financial services through retail, mortgage, commercial, middle market banking, as well as wealth management. We have an extremely strong commitment to the community, and it is really part of our culture and our DNA. And we understand that strategic and meaningful investments that we deploy in the community has a direct impact on economic development and builds quality of life. You've probably seen us make some investments in early childhood education with the New Hanover Partnership for Children and the library system. Arts and cultural initiatives, we're the presenting sponsor of the Broadway series here at the Wilson Arts Center, and a number of other community development initiatives. Diversity inclusion is one of our core values at PNC, and we have a number of comprehensive women's initiatives internally for our employees and externally for our clients and community. This event in particular, along with Women to Watch and other women's initiatives that champion and elevates women as leaders, is a priority.
While it's important we take moments in time to honor accomplishments of women and hear stories that energize and inspire us, true leadership and building a culture of leadership happens on the ground every day by everyone. We all have a responsibility to make this happen, no matter where you are in your life cycle, in business, or in the community. It's important we also keep that same momentum to help encourage and champion our youngest women as new women leaders as they evolve into the workforce. It's a privilege to be part of this amazing community, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces and new faces in the crowd. My name is Vicki Janowski. As Maggie was saying, I'm editor of the Business Journal, of WILMA Magazine, of our newly launched Wilmington Biz Magazine, and also have the pleasure of, for several years now, co-directing this women's leadership program with Maggie. And every year we do have a panel talk or a speaker for a large event such as this, because we want to get advice and tap the brains of those in our community that we can learn from and maybe put them in the hot seat a little bit, but we're going to leave that up to you. I'll just tell you how in just a second. So today we have the opportunity to hear from experienced leaders from our communities who represent a variety of fields and backgrounds. The one thing they have in common is they lead teams currently, they have led teams, they've developed their career around leading teams. And so we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk with them and see really what makes them tick, what motivates them, and how they go about their leadership style. You might notice something different about today's panel if you've come to our Women's Initiative programs before. Yes, we have invited men to talk to us. Some of you may ask why. We'll see. Well, for one thing, we wanted to hear from the top leaders of our community, of which Brett and David most certainly are. But also, we felt, if you're going to talk about women's leadership and women's leadership development and how those opportunities are going to improve in our workplace, it only makes sense to involve the other half of the population so that they can become allies and supporters in those efforts, and also to understand how different leaders view this issue. And of course, as we say at all our events, this is your conversation. I'm moderating, but I really want to make this your discussion, your chance to ask your questions to this brain trust we've got up here for you for the next hour and a half. So be sure to text in your questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. The number's in your program, but if you want to write it down, it's 910-431-7374. Again, it's in your program, but feel free, please, to ask what's ever on your mind, and we'll break for several of those questions. So to introduce our panel today, starting here on my immediate left, we have David Simmons, who's CEO of PPD, Wanda Coley, President of WellCare Health, Brett Martin, CEO of Castle Branch, who also founded Tech Mountain, and Judy Gerard, former president of the Food Network and HGTV, who retired here and then co-founded GLOW, the state's first all-girls charter school. Collectively, they're responsible for nearly 22,000 employees and 300 middle schoolers.
Wow, we are.
You can guess which one's tougher. So just to get to know them a little bit better and start things off, I want to ask, starting with you, David, tell us a little bit about why you are in the job that you are now, and did you envision being a CEO?
Okay, I didn't envision being a CEO till roughly 2006. So I graduated from university in 1986, so it was 20 years where I would have never thought about becoming a CEO. And at first I just wanted to get a job and kind of take care of myself and be independent. But at a certain point, I was working for Pfizer for 15 years before coming to PPD. And during that time, I had the good fortune of having some advocacy and some good luck and good teams and maybe some some personal talent, and combined was able to get to a position where I was asked what did I want, what was I aspiring for my career. And I didn't think CEO, I just thought I really like these general management jobs where I have a profit and loss statement and competition and quick feedback loops and clear accountability. If we hit the targets, it was good, it was on me. If we didn't hit the targets, it was good, it was on me and my team. And that I liked that. It was a way to measure and learn and grow. And then so I just asked, I'd like to do that more and more until maybe I'm not doing it as well as your next best alternative for who could do that. So maybe that was at a country level or a regional level. At Pfizer, well, at Pfizer it went up to a divisional president level, which was reporting to the CEO, and I had about 20 billion of revenues reporting into me. I never cared about the numbers or the size, frankly. It was all about the challenge of the business and the people I was working with and what we were trying to do, what were we trying to accomplish fundamentally. And then, so PPD came up, and again, I didn't really have CEO title specifically as what I was going for, but this was a challenge. It was private equity was taking the company private. That would be new for me. It was in a services element of healthcare. That was new for me. It was a CEO role, which I didn't know at the time the difference between a divisional president and a large multinational public company versus a CEO of a private equity company. I do know the difference now. It's very different. And so that's how I got here. But I honestly, until maybe 2006, I hadn't aspired to be CEO or anything like that.
What about Wanda? Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this position now, and did you expect to become the CEO?
Sure. And first, I do want to say hats off to Vicki and to Maggie for this great event. Thank you for putting this together. It's phenomenal. Let's give them a round of applause. So very similar to David, and I didn't necessarily have an aspiration to be where I am today, specifically in the role of president and COO. I've always aspired to do my best. My background is in accounting, and in accounting, when you're in college, the natural path is to graduate, become a CPA, and go work for a big 6 accounting firm. And they teach you to put on the blue suit or black suit when you go for your interviews, and stockings, which no one wears that today, so I'm kind of aging myself. So that was kind of the path that I thought that I would go. And I cut my teeth in the healthcare industry while I was in college in operations in the healthcare sector, in the home health sector, and just kind of learned the basics and was really excited about that, being in college and able to dress up and have a part-time job and go to work. Kind of building my independence, and once I graduated from college, I was promoted to a full-time accounting position, and so I was on my path to accounting. And throughout the years, I worked at the hospital and kind of got my feet wet in some in operations and accounting again. And from that, the healthcare home health department was sold, and I joined WellCare as the controller. So when I reflected on kind of my path, I started out in operations, went back into accounting, not knowing that really I was building a career to be a chief operating officer one day. It kind of came back full circle where I was able to learn all the facets of the organization. We have a lot of nurses and therapists in our organization providing hands-on care. That's probably the one thing that I cannot do. Sometimes I call myself a fake nurse. Because I work with nurses and therapists and clinicians every day that actually provide the hands-on care, and I do everything that I can to support them. So I was controller for 10 years at WellCare, and then as the organization grew, there was a position created for chief operating officer. And when you're sitting in the chief financial officer or controller seat, you really see everything else that's going on in the organization. And you can make a decision to really be a reporter of what's going on or actually be an agent of change. And I chose to be an agent of change, and I chose to speak up when I saw things were not going the way that they should go and drive change in the organization, which then propelled me into the chief operating officer role. And so I did that for 7 years, and unfortunately in September of last year, our CEO, Wayne Long, who was the founder of the organization along with his wife, passed away, and I worked very closely with Wayne for 17 years. A phenomenal guy, phenomenal leader, phenomenal mentor. And when he passed away, the opportunity presented for me to step into the president role. And when I was offered that opportunity, of course, I questioned myself of whether or not I was really ready to take on such a large role. And then at the same time, I decided, why not? Why not me? And you know, I've been prepared for this. Wayne dropped a lot of nuggets along the way. I didn't really know why. His death was unexpected. And so I decided to accept the challenge. And you know, just reflecting over my career, I think I've accepted the challenges along the way, even when I didn't think I was prepared, but I've always tried to study and learn to prepare myself. So here I am today. I'm President and COO. It's phenomenal. It's a challenging role. At the end of the day, the buck stops here, and I have to accept responsibility for making good decisions and making bad decisions. So I'm constantly now in my career, I'm thinking, what's next? You know, I don't know what's next. I don't want this to be the end of my career, so I'm challenging myself to go to the next level, whatever that may be.
Brett, tell us, how did you get here?
Before I do that, I want to say how proud I am that you decided to invite two men. Thank you very much. I'd also like to correct you, Vicki. These two men, we don't represent half. Women, actually, are the majority of our population now. Men are the minority. Women now represent 50.8%. So we are the minority here, just so everyone knows.
Yes.
Finally, eventually, with some good work, we'll even be more the minority. And that's what today is about. But we're not talking about that yet. So I'm an entrepreneur. I call myself a climber. I compare my life to a mountain climber. I'm a builder. I'm a creator. I never wanted to be a CEO. I never imagined the position existed. I just wanted to build. I wanted to get up every morning and get myself and my company a little bit further up the mountain. And we've done that for 25 years, and we've gotten pretty high up the mountain. Unfortunately, because I came to a CEO through entrepreneurship, I was never trained as a CEO, and that's a problem with entrepreneurship. Most of us come, well, it's a problem and a blessing. Most of us come from very diverse backgrounds because we don't come out of an educational system that creates us. You can't go to school. Well, there's a program here at UNC of which I am the resident entrepreneur. So, wait, you can kind of go to school to become an entrepreneur. But then you need to come and be an entrepreneur, so come hang out with me afterwards. But the truth is, many of us aren't really trained to be CEOs because CEOs, it's a much larger title. It references caring for an entire community. And we didn't learn that as entrepreneurs. I was an actor. I came to entrepreneurship through creativity. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about inclusion. I learned a lot about treating people fairly because that is part of the tenets of acting. So I bring those lessons to entrepreneurship, and I try to apply that to me being a CEO. But honestly, I lack some of the pedigree that many of our great CEOs in this country have. And that's okay, because we have them. My job is different, right? I'm a builder. I'm supposed to push the end of the balloon and create stuff. But still, you end up being a CEO, and you have to teach yourself how to be a good CEO. And I've tried to lift that ball up the mountain, and I think we're doing a good job, but it's a real tough journey. I think what's most important about my journey here is my past, and I think it's reflected in the kind of company we built. I'm very proud of Castle Branch. It is a very inclusive place. We'll talk more about that. We've taken some hard stances against some hard issues like HB2. We recently produced or was part of the Wilmington on Fire screening that we did at our offices to look again at what the cost of not being inclusive actually is. So it's been a tremendous journey. I am so proud to be a CEO, but I'll be honest, I'm still learning. So we'll see how much I learned, I guess.
by all accounts, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have even been able to hold a job. When I was in high school, I was failing everything, absolutely everything. And I loved shoplifting. I thought shoplifting I thought that was the best thing ever. I loved it. And I loved getting drunk as an underage student. And I was failing. I don't know whether I was failing everything and then got to those couple of things, or whether I'm not sure what the relationship was, to be honest with you. But the place I loved shoplifting the best with it was Epstein's department store in Morristown, New Jersey. And Mr. Epstein caught me one day and took me to his office, and he said, here's what we're going to do. You're going to work off everything that you just stole at 4 times what it cost on the ticket. And so I started working every Friday night and Saturday, and I loved it. I found that I loved it. It was just a whole different world than the one I was in. But meanwhile, I was a senior and had all these D's and F's. And Ithaca College had just started a radio television department, and they really needed women badly, badly. And so somehow I connected there, and I went there, and when I got there, there was a new teaching assistant, a new teacher there, professor there, and his name was Rod Serling. And Rod did The Twilight Zone. For many of you, probably, most of you probably don't know that, but it was a brilliant, brilliant show, way ahead of its time. And he had gotten pissed off at CBS because they told him he had to put products in there that people paid for, and he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. And he left, and he was taking a year off teaching at Ithaca College, and I became his teaching assistant. And he taught me so much about just honoring who you are, just honoring who you are. And I didn't have a positive image of all that by any means. And by the time I graduated college, my grades still were terrible. Well, they still were terrible. And in hindsight, I haven't been tested for it because I don't want to know, but I'm almost sure I have ADD or ADHD. And by then they didn't really know what that was, and I'd probably be a pill addict. Well, I was a pill addict for a while. So I would still be a pill addict if I ever got tested for it, so I don't do that. But I came out of there with things that I thought were my weaknesses, like multitasking, not being able to focus on anything, no concentration whatsoever, just nothing like that. Not being able to read a book, hated studying. All of those weaknesses are actually strengths in television. And so I just kind of fell into it, because in television you have to keep 60 balls in the air at one time. And you got to bring them down long before you should, long before they're baked, because you're going to hit the air whatever happens. And I loved it. I thrived on it instead of getting buried in it the way it's so easy to do, because it's such a tough business. So that's kind of my story about how I mean, I'd love to say I decided to be in television and was brilliant and all that, but it's not the way it worked.
Okay, so now you know what we're working with here. Now you know. Text in your question.
The 2 crazy people they put on this side of the room, just in case you want to know.
No.
Those 2 are CEO straights. Us, I don't know what we are.
Okay.
Okay.
So Brett mentioned some statistics a minute ago, and just population statistics, so I'm going to share a couple more to jump into this next question. But the Women in the Workplace study that Lean In did last year, which surveys hundreds of companies nationwide. And so this is last year. This is now several years into the Lean In movement, but still found that 1 in 5 C-suite leaders is a woman. 1 in 30 is a woman of color. And that gap is found all along the pipeline of management. And the biggest gender gap is that first step up to manager. So entry-level women are 18% less likely to be promoted than their male peers. So I guess I throw those numbers out to you and those current numbers out to you, and to ask, what's going on? Like, what do you think, in your opinion, is happening there, and what do you think needs to be addressed to kind of even up those numbers?
What'd you say the first number is? What's it based on?
1 in 5 are C-suite leaders are women, and 1 in 30 C-suite leaders or executives are women of color.
David may know this number, but of the Fortune 500 companies, aren't there only like 18 women?
5% of the CEOs of Fortune 500 are women, 91% are white men.
And those numbers have not changed in the entire time I've been around.
No.
Maybe they're up 1 percentage point or not. And I remember a couple of years ago, somebody did a survey or a study of women who were up for the top CEO job and why they didn't get it. And they did a 2-year study on this, and they found, and people with boards and so forth, decision makers were very honest about it, that women were it was felt very strongly women were less likely to make the really hard, big, high-risk decisions that may result in failure. And that was the perception. And I think that's why those numbers haven't changed.
If I could add a couple things just on the numbers dynamic, I think the other thing is that tenure of a CEO has been 5 years and trending south. So the relevance of this is there's churn. That's I don't know C-suite overall, but certainly CEO level. So there's churn. It's not like there's stagnancy. So if it's staying at 91% white men and 5% women in the Fortune 500, it's not because there's not churn and decisions being made. There's some other reasons, because you could say, okay, well, it's hard to move this because people aren't going out of the jobs fast enough, and it's going to take a millennia to do that. But I don't think that's the case. It kind of maybe brings the question into a more of a strict point. I would say I'd seen some research from Harvard on this question, and there's a kind of very tempting and often accurate view towards their subconscious bias in the placement process. So you have the white men who are dominating the board landscape and the CEO landscape who are making decisions, and there's you could say conscious or subconscious, but the kind of the more optimistic way is to say it's subconscious, but all of us probably have some attraction towards what is like us. If it's qualities about us, we see it reflected. We see ourselves reflected from another that's attractive. So this bias kind of leans into this. The Harvard research was looking at academics in Harvard, and that same thing was occurring. Getting to tenure was more male-dominated in the placements than female-dominated, and they wanted to unpack that from an academic perspective. But subconscious bias was one of the beliefs they had, and what they found was that was very dangerous if there was a push just to place numbers, because there was some systemic readiness of the female population of academics. And one was, I remember one criteria in this case was publication volumes was an important criteria for promotion to a tenured professorship. And there was the females that were up for promotion that didn't get it versus the males that got the promotion. There was a massive out of balance publication volume piece. So they unpacked that a bit further, and what they were hypothesizing was that there was I don't know, you might have used the term courage or something, but there was an unwillingness of the women academics to publish because their papers were far from perfect, and they didn't want to expose their thinking in the peer review process, and the men typically had no problem with that. So the point of this is subconscious bias is one element. There's another element which is, okay, either the systems have to kind of look for criteria that maybe it's not the right criteria by which judgments are being made and those should be challenged, or there has to be an onion peeling in each particular company or industry or discipline, in this case professorships, to say, okay, what is important here and how do we help the women get the publication volume if that is an important criteria. So anyway, I'm just bringing some things up. I think it's a highly complex question. I don't think it's some massive international conspiracy. I think it's much more, that'd probably be easier to solve. I think it's much more complex. The numbers would suggest that at least up to a certain level of the workforce population, the proportionality of women are at robust enough numbers so that the feeder pools, the technical term of more senior leadership, at a certain point is breaking down. That it's not, there are women filling ranks up through the managerial level, but when you get up into the senior management positions and leadership positions, there's a drop-off.
And I don't think it's going to change until women own the part of that they contribute to.
Yeah, I was gonna, I'm sorry, Judy.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, Wanda, you work in a predominantly female industry and healthcare, and you see a lot of women who are in those managerial pipeline positions. What do you think is something that would be helpful to the issue?
So it's interesting. It's a very interesting question because we are a female-dominated industry, and you see a lot of women in nursing and being healthcare providers, not only in the home but in hospitals. You know, I actually think there's a calling for men to be nurses. But it is true that you see up through the ranks that women hold a lot of the management supervisor positions, but then when you get to the C-suite level, it's actually a lot of men. I was just at a financial managers conference, CEOs and CFOs, and it was a lot of men there in a female-dominated industry. And I think you hit on it, Judy, that so often we are primed for the job, we have the talent for the position, we should take the role, and then we're hesitant and we don't have the confidence to step in. And honestly, in reading some of the different books and publications that are out there, it's just this perception that about women and us taking leadership positions, that sometimes I think we start believing some of the stuff that we read, that we aren't really prepared to take on different roles, when in fact we are, and we have to take risk. And we have to not be afraid of failure. I see that sometimes in our organization where we have great leaders that are afraid to fail. And in order to be a great leader, you have to fail. And that's really how you learn. You can't be afraid of failure. I shouldn't say you have to fail. Personally, you necessarily don't want to fail, but you can't be afraid to make a bad decision or to fail. So I think you'll start seeing that shift as we look at this room today full of women. And I encourage you to take risk and to take the steps and prepare yourselves and always be ready. That's how I got where I am today. Just standing ready and always preparing myself for whatever positions and forging your own way and not waiting for opportunities to come, but creating opportunities for yourself and then stepping into it.
Okay, thank you. I think we have some questions from the audience.
Yeah, Vicki, if we could hear from Brooke at table 28.
My question is, how do you maintain your, and especially your team's, motivation despite obstacles or setbacks that you may run into?
Brett, do you want to take that?
I don't.
Excellent.
You don't want to take it, or you don't maintain?
I don't want to take that. I want to comment on the last question. So let me start there, and then I'll get there. You know, I don't think the problem is that complicated. I think the problem is very simple. I think the solution is complicated. So the problem, the way I look at it, is we have a limited amount of power, and power is a limited resource, and we're asking 80% of the owners, of the leaders of this business, these white men, to give up their power. You know, when in history have white men or people ever given up power willingly? Right? Ever. Okay? It's only happened once, and it was the Dalai Lama. He was the only dude able to give up power without a fight. The rest of us fight for power because power is limited. Right? You know, you mentioned that it's because of education, and maybe people aren't smart enough. But we know that 50%, actually 48% of the medical degrees in this country go to women. But women make up 16% of the medical deans, right? It's a problem of power. It's not a problem of who belongs there. It's a problem of the people who are there currently got there first, and they don't want to give up their spot on the mountain. We've been playing King of the Mountain for thousands of years. Every industry plays King of the Mountain. You know, corporate America, it took corporate America 200 years to get 25 women to the CEO spot of Fortune 500 companies. 25 women, 200 years. Why do we think that's going to change immediately? These men don't want to give up their power. And what's happening, right? All of a sudden, these 91% white males who are on top of these organizations are seeing all these other people climbing up the mountain. The women are climbing up the mountain, they want power. African American men and women are climbing up the mountain and they want power. Latinos want power and they're climbing up the mountain. Millennials want power, they want to kick the old white men off. And the old white men see this and they're like, oh dude, I am not letting any of these people kick me off, right? Corporate America is not predisposed to do what you're asking it to do. So the problem is simple. It's a matter of power, and people don't give up power.
I respectfully disagree a bit. I think in some areas, you may be right, like medical deans of schools and tenured positions in government institutions possibly. But in for-profit businesses, especially in private equity, but I think public institutions are the same. I'll use PPD as an example. Rather than man or woman, if a Martian came down here tomorrow and our private equity owners thought they could take the company from 12% market share to 20% at the same margins we have now, I'd be out of a job tomorrow. Now, whether I'd fight, and if I actually believed it, I'd ask if I could keep my shares and I would willingly step down and I'd participate in that. I think the power of capital and returns on capital is extremely powerful. And so I think in some cases it's right, but it's what you're saying. I find it appealing, but it doesn't reflect what I'm seeing. I think if a woman can get herself into a position of a competitive race and a competitive dynamic for a CEO job, and the hiring apparatus believes that that woman will take the company forward and evolve it in a way that's better than their next best alternative, which could be a white guy, the woman will get the job.
Then why do we have 5% of women in these positions?
I don't know.
Well, yes, see, that's the problem. That logic doesn't work for me. The fact is that 80+%, I mean, well, look at you mentioned that if it was equal, right, they would be able to rise together. But the truth is it's not equal. From the lens of entrepreneurship, when a woman starts a business, she starts a business with half the money that a man starts the business. Now, why is that? Who are the people lending the money, right? We go back to the white men, right? Those who hold those strings are those same 80%. You will look at any industry, you will see it's dominated by 80% of white men and 20% of women. It's the same thing in the media industry. It's a little better right now.
It's a little better, yeah.
There was a study in the media industry, the Southern California Annenberg study, which was just released, the most comprehensive study of the media industry ever. It looked at inclusion, and what did it find? It found that 20% of the women, there's only one female major network CEO, 20% are women, 80% are men. When you look at the materials they produce, when you look at the movies they produce, of all the movies that were produced last year, of the speaking roles, 70% were men, 30% were women, right? We're not even letting our women speak in our movies, so what are we letting them do? So we looked at who those women were, and of those 60% of the women, no, of those 30% of the women, 60% were between the ages of 20 and 30. So what's going on? If they can't speak, why? Oh, maybe it's because how they look, right? So let's look at that. When you look at those 30% of the people between the ages of 21 and 39, those actresses, 26% of them had to dress scantily clothed or be partially nude in the movie. 26% of our 30% of women who were in the movies last year. And what's worse, if you look at that same statistic for women who are 13 to 21, we're doing the same thing to those young actresses. They are scantily clothed and they're partially nude because it's legal. So I think it's truly unfair. I don't think it's balanced. I don't even think it's close to balanced. I think you'll find 80-20 everywhere you look. And if you find 80-20, it's never, ever, ever going to be fair.
So we do have some other questions coming up about some of those issues that are brought up and some of the current issues. But I do want to get back to Brooke's question and make sure we have time for questions in general about leadership development and how you guys think. So she was asking in terms of motivating teams, particularly during challenging times. Judy, you went through a lot of different challenges in terms of the change of the media landscape, or just in terms of working with the teams now, but just when it comes to pure motivation on a daily basis, what have you found to be helpful as a leader?
Empower them. Empower them to the hilt to do what they do. And if you put your team together right and you have strong people on it, you can empower them. And I think, one of the differences between, I'm going to be really generalized here, guys, so don't throw stones at me. One of the differences between women and how they manage and men and how they manage is I think women are prone more to manage through teams and to really care about teams as individual people, and not be so focused on total results at all cost. And I think that's probably why the numbers stay, frankly, where they are to some extent, because when somebody's hiring, in the example you gave, David, they're hiring potential, right? There's a potential of, can this person raise the equity, do whatever. And I think women's potential does not get stated as strongly in the workplace, because and again, I think we can only do what we can control, not the big world and the male dominance and all. We can only do what we can change. And I think we do not embrace potential well, and I think we do not express it well. And I think managing a team, most of my jobs I got because I could put together good teams and manage them. But if I had worked for a company that was really, that had a different kind of culture, television's loose and you've got to do it by a team. But if I was working for a company that had a different culture, that potential would not have the same value to the company. Actually, I can give you an example. I worked for Disney. I took a job with Disney. And you would think that that would be the most creative company. And I reported directly to the CEO, which was a nightmare. And it was just a nightmare. And we were building I won't bore you with that, but anyway. And it was all about the P&L. Everything was financially, and that's what Disney is. That's why Disney is successful in the way it is. It was all about the P&L. There was nothing about creativity. There was no room for, let's take a chance on this because it's creative, it's whatever, it's a good use of ESPN, it's, whatever, let's change the way we're doing a little bit of football, which was me telling them how to do football was hysterical. But Disney wasn't the right culture for me because my management values and my management strengths are in teams, and a team was not what Disney needed. Disney needed that job anyway, needed a really strong individual, financially orientated, highly skilled manager to get things done because of the culture of the corporate. And I don't think we read those tea leaves very well. I think women in general kind of think, well, if I work really hard at this and I'm really good at what I do, I'm going to automatically move and take David's job. And I don't think that's true. I think it depends on the culture and what people are looking for. And if you haven't figured out, if you haven't picked your culture, then I think you've made a mistake. You can pick a job, it's great. Everybody looks at what's the individual job, what am I going into, that's great. I'm really good at this job, I'm going to make it because I'm good at this job. And if you haven't picked your culture correctly so that it supports you as much, if not more, than the actual job you're doing, then you're going to have to move to get the opportunities that you want. I think Wanda started to describe your culture. Obviously, there was a culture there. I never met him, but I heard he was an unbelievable manager, right?
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal. And he built a culture there, recognizing your potential, without really ever telling you that, probably, in terms of that you would.
I think that was really what helped me propel in my career, because he did tell me. And we had those conversations on purpose, a lot of times because I asked. And, sitting here thinking about listening to all the numbers and the statistics is really what I do not focus on. Statistics and 80% of white men here and 20% women here doesn't matter to me. And in fact, I kind of work against the statistics because I don't want to be one. And probably I am one because I'm African American, right, in a leadership position, but that's not my focus. If I have what it takes to do the job, then why shouldn't I sit in that position?
Bravo.
And that's up to us to bring that to the table. So when I think about the motivation and how do I stay motivated, it's just being energetic and exuding energy and being in the right place and doing things that motivate me to be great, and then surrounding myself around with team members that exude that same energy. And listening to you talk, I'm thinking about kind of a litmus test that I use when I'm interviewing someone. I walk really fast down the hall on purpose. And if they walk slow, I know right away they're not the person that will fit our culture. If they walk fast, then we're probably going to have a longer interview because there's potential there. But that's what I look for, is the energy. I'm motivated by being energetic, being excited, because I love what I do, and I want to surround myself with people who exude the same and are in the right place. And winning. And sometimes winning is based on, did we hit the numbers this month, or did we just save someone's life? Because that's what we do at the end of the day. So, I think the reading the different numbers and the statistics and leadership books and just being motivated to do something great and make a difference in this world is really the game changer for me as a leader.
Great, thanks, Wanda. We have another question?
Yeah, our next question is from Michelle at table 35.
Stand up. Hi. It's a lot of people. Okay, so you guys had talked about decision making earlier, so I think that's really interesting. In my personal and professional life, I have analysis to paralysis all the time, and I'm planning a wedding, so that's not good. But what are your strategies for confidence in decision making? Because for me, it just stems from lack of confidence, I think, so I'd love to hear from you guys.
For me, it would be not being afraid of failure, and knowing that out of failure often comes great ideas. Mm-hmm. It often leads you in another direction if you don't get bogged down by it. That would be me.
For me, it would be understanding the landscape. I mean, the reason why I have so many numbers and statistics in my head is because as an entrepreneur, it's my job to look at a landscape, examine the landscape, interpret the landscape, and then find a path that no one else can find. Corporate America spends a lot of time running up corporate America's path, which is generally the center of the mountain. Entrepreneurs, we find creative paths up the mountain, and suddenly someone says, hey man, how'd you get there? I don't know how many times people have said that to me in my life. So being able to see the landscape for its truth, having honest vision. And for me, honest vision often comes numerically because numbers don't lie. It's why CEOs do believe in P&Ls and budgets, because they are a great guide. At the same time, there are essential elements outside of that. But for me, having honest vision, when I have honest vision, I am confident in my decisions because I have the support and knowledge behind them, not just my feelings and my thought. But real credible, actionable information. Because when I make a decision, it's going to affect 500, 600, 1,000 people. So I have to really have honest vision to be confident.
I think that goes to making decisions based on facts, right, and not emotion. And when you're making decisions based on emotions, oftentimes it's when you do make the wrong decision. But numbers don't lie, or you make sure you have the facts to make decisions. And sometimes you do have to make decisions based on emotions if it's something that's imminent, but at the same time, making a decision to me is better than not making a decision in some situations. And again, if it's not the right decision, you course correct and you own it. Analysis paralysis and having so much data really can put you in a position that it's a detriment to the organization if you're not able to get to the facts or use data to make really good decisions. But when you're looking at data, you got to understand what you're looking at and why you're looking at it and what's the purpose of it. So I would encourage you to make a decision versus not make a decision because you're afraid.
Yeah, maybe three things that are complementary to add to this. Just to confirm, I think you've got to embrace that facts are facts. There's so much temptation to, because we want something, we assemble factoids to support what we want to be, and it's really hard to force yourself into seeing reality for what it is, because sometimes it's very unpleasant. But if you don't accept, whether it's unpleasant or pleasant, if you don't accept the reality, it's very tough to make a good decision, and the decision could wind up, costing a lot, whether it's financial or otherwise. And that's one point. The second point is, I think experience helps. So whether it's your own experience or the experience of team members around you, and this is where team assembly gets very important. Someone having a team member or through yourself having a lot of experience in an area means that that person can generate hypothesis that would lead to a decision. Either it's a hypothesis of a risk that's facing a business, a challenge that could be coming, or an opportunity yet to be exploited. And so a really good decision process is having experience to generate, or having a good hypothesis generation mechanism with really good advanced analytical techniques to either validate or invalidate the hypothesis, and then staying true to that discipline. And then finally, the final point is more psychological, and all of us are wired differently, but I see a lot of people who have perfection standards, so they're afraid to make decisions because they're afraid to be wrong. It's like it's binary in their mind. If I'm not right, I'm wrong. But there's a lot of gray area, so, and I have a little bit of this in me, so I was taught to take that subconscious drive and make an intellectual process, which the trick is I think about batting average. So is it better, and some bosses of mine in the past told me one time, we'd rather you make 1,000 decisions and get 80% of them right than 2 decisions and get them perfect. And so that's how I've embraced and overcome this, how to operationalize this concept of don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, but if you are making 60% mistakes, it's a problem. So anybody fool you, but if you make a lot of decisions and you can minimize the mistakes and learn from them, that's pretty powerful.
Was there something along the way in your career that you did have a mistake or misstep in leadership that you had to learn from?
I had a lot. I'll give one because it's kind of, the numbers are prolific. So as I was actually, this was one of the things that kind of catapulted me into my most senior role at Pfizer. But I was leading a team, and we were looking at going into, Pfizer was going to pursue a biosimilar strategy. It's not important what it is. It was new. It was a new approach for Pfizer. And I was asked to look at this, and we needed to partner with a company to try to make an entry into this market so we could see how pricing behaviors in the market would respond. How would our pricing modeling work so we could determine how much money we could make? And is that where we should put our capital, or should we put it somewhere else? That was the fundamental question. So I talk about confirmation bias. I didn't use the term, but that was what I was referring to earlier. So I wanted to believe something around the partner company, and I pushed our diligence team too hard to come to conclusions too quickly. And we missed a false warrant from the partner company that they could have a manufacturing pilt by a certain amount of time so we could get to the market on the date that our model called for. So net out of this, I went to the board of Pfizer and got them to approve a capital allocation of some $200 million. And I went back within a year to tell them we had unwound the partnership and write off the $200 million. And so one, it's not painful that you're an up-and-coming executive and you're making a mistake of that magnitude, but have to do it in front of, you talk the board into doing this, and then you go back in that short a period of time. Remember the CEO of Pfizer telling me, who's still there, Ian Reed, he said, you know what you're doing, right? I mean, you just got this signed off, and it's like 12 months later, and you're coming back, you know how this looks. And I said, yeah, I know how it looks. And he said, then why are you doing it? And I said, because we're throwing good money after bad if we keep investing in this. We were wrong. I pushed the diligence team. It was a mistake. And that's where my credibility went, owning it. I had to own it. I really didn't think about what the consequences were. I just knew that I represented the company, and I represented the company's investors, and I had to make the right decision. So yeah. I got a lot of them. I can stay up here. They're like a comedy skit, all my errors. But that was a pretty big one.
Did you ever have a swing and a miss as a leader?
Did I have any, say again?
Just like a swing and a miss, a whiff.
Yeah, I had a big miss. I was at NBC, and the station in Chicago wanted to finish off their studio, and GE had just bought us, and GE said, because they were all finance too, is you have to have some income in that studio for us to go ahead and do it. So there was a anchor in Cincinnati who ran for mayor. He was the youngest mayor ever in the country, fabulous mayor. And he was running for re-election, and he paid a prostitute with a check. And so that wasn't a good thing, right? So he lost.
Everything about the story is disturbing.
Prostitute, right? Prostitute took the check.
But here's the payoff. His name was Jerry Springer.
But to the account.
So, but he had a great television thing going. And so somebody pitched me on, why don't you hire Jerry Springer, put him, and I do a daily talk show with him because he's great on politics and all that business. And we did that. We put him in Chicago, and it was he's one of the smartest people I ever met, by the way. It was a disaster. Oh my God, it was a ratings disaster. It was a financial disaster. It was awful. And we were literally doing the last week of shows. When Jerry said something to somebody, they were sitting like this, and something to somebody over there, and the guy got so pissed off, he jumped out of the chair and hit the person next to him.
Don't do that.
That became the Jerry Springer Show. I mean, literally, that became the Jerry Springer Show, which has now made, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars over its lifetime. And Jack Welch, you know, who's, well, I won't say anything about Jack, but he came in, he was doing a tour, and I was in the Chicago studio. And by this point, Springer was really successful. And one of his honchos came over to me and he said, Mr. Welsh wants you to know that the Jerry Springer Show does not fit the GE image. And I said to him, I'm really sorry about that. I'll do whatever you guys want to do. I just want you to know it cleared $23 million so far. Never heard from him again. And now it's all these years later, and Jerry's a millionaire. And the interesting thing is, and I'll make this point even though it's not part of the question. I saw Jerry on Fox News not long ago, maybe a year ago, and it was his 20-some anniversary. And there was a sadness about him that so struck me, because his whole life he wanted to be a politician. And he was a great mayor. I mean, he was a great mayor. And if there was ever a time, and this was pre-Trump, if there was ever a time that he wanted to be in Washington, it would have been then. And there was a sadness that instead of following that dream and being a politician, he was a multi-millionaire from a talk show that everybody makes fun of. And there was a sadness about him, and I thought, oh my God, he can never go back and do his life again. And by all measurement, he's successful, right? But he really isn't, based on, you know, it's hard.
Well, let me ask you guys, last year when we did the Accelerator panel, it was in a lot of coverage was going on around the Me Too movement, and we talked as a panel about what the lasting legacy might be of that. Was it, you know, going to be a movement or a moment, and what changes in the workplace with sexual harassment or just beyond in terms of women in the workplace might come about from it. So now that it's been several months have gone by since then, and we kind of want to check in and I'm curious of y'all's opinion about what differences do you think it has made in the workplace, and now with some more hindsight, what do you think will be the lasting impact, if any, of what's been going on the past year?
Well, I'd have to say, within our organization, the Me Too movement for me personally has been very eye-opening to see, you know, these people in power just misuse their power. In our organization, we have a no tolerance for sexual harassment, and the Me Too movement has brought a lot of awareness to me personally. I was just at a business the other day, and I was checking out and paying for bottled water, and this man walks by, the attendant, and she just kind of giggles and looks at him. And I'm thinking, what's going on here, you know? And so she says, oh, he's such a flirt. He's such a flirt. I was bending over the other day, and he said, oh, Betty, I don't even remember her name. Betty, don't bend over like that. That's not a good position. She's telling me this as a stranger. And I'm saying, what is going on? So I look at this guy, he's walking away, and she says, yeah, he's no harm. He's harmless. That's what she said to me. And I said, he's harmless? No. No, and so then I started thinking about these situations that sometimes we may say it's a harmless situation. Oh, he's not a scumbag. If he was a scumbag, I wouldn't let him talk to me like that. So I'm thinking, well, what's the scumbag versus this guy's not harmless? And how do we as women characterize those different situations when we allow those things to happen to us? And so sometimes when we think things are harmless or people are saying something to us, it really is harmless. It really is harmful, but we for whatever reason, departmentalize it into our minds. So being very cautious and conscious of what I say, even if it's to another woman, potentially about another man, can come back and haunt you later. And with devices today, you don't know who's recording what when you're having a conversation. So I haven't really seen it in our organization, but it has definitely brought a lot more awareness around what people will do to other, whether it's men doing it to men or women mistreating women. It goes on a lot more than what we know about or have known about. And social media and different platforms today have really brought it to light. I think it will be something that will continue to move forward as people are becoming brave and starting to speak up more about it. And even men will be more aware of making decisions, or women of their approach and things that they say in the workplace.
I would say in PPD, just to put in perspective, probably the more dominant topic by far than, we don't talk about the hashtag #MeToo movement, but around issues surrounding that, the company has a great deal of interest and standards and concern. But the dominant factor that's relevant here is, how when we're making placements at VP level and above, the slating process that we're trying to do our version of the Rooney Rule from the NFL, but to make sure the slate of candidates for any given role is a diverse slate of candidates, so we don't rush to a candidate. So if there is subconscious bias, that's the first bulwark of policy that can try to make sure that candidates are being reviewed. Then having a panel of interviewers, even though the hiring manager sets the criteria, and then all the panel comes together. This, how do we get at wherever subconscious bias or conscious bias is at play, how do we root that out through policy and practice? That's dominating of the topics that we've been discussing here, what we're thinking about. There's been a lot of work over the last 5 years around equal pay for equal outcomes is the way we're describing it. It's not kind of men versus women, but in a role, we have enough people, we have 20,000 people around the world, so within a job class, we have enough numbers to look at whether there's pay disparities and fixing those. That's taken a lot of time. So when we get into this area, we've always had a culture pre-David Simmons, back to Fred Eshelman starting this place, of respect and concern for each other. And there's always, as a large company would have, anonymous hotlines into our legal group, a legal counsel who will vet these in an anonymous way, set up investigations and take care of them. I haven't seen any. We have a volume of those that's relatively light, at least for what I was used to at Pfizer, and that continues to be the same way. I would say that the hashtag #MeToo movement for senior executives, I have seen almost all of us, although we don't talk about it that much, being very careful and cautious about interpretations of use of humor or and small things. Like, I won't do a meeting in my office alone with a female with my door closed. I make sure my assistant's at her desk seeing what's going on and being able to be a witness later if anything was said about me. I hate being this way. So I don't know where this is all going, but it's got repercussions. I would say in balance, the kind of on the scale of monsterdom, 0 to 10, and monsters of 4 to the 10 range, it's worth taking care of that and being able to shine a light on really bad behaviors. And it's probably worth dealing with the price to pay, which is, some of the cautious behaviors in people like me. But again, this is another one. I think how this is going to play out. It is an important topic, and again, I think it's worth taking the price to pay, which is going to be some pullback, I think, by executive males that maybe otherwise don't have anything to worry about, but are just scared. because of the movement, but it's probably worth paying that price to address what the movement is intended to address.
But therein lies the negative, too. You and I have talked about this last time, I think. Therein lies the negative in that the higher up in an organization that a woman is going, the more her personality and who she is plays a role in the decision, right? Because you have a lot of people that can do the job, presumably. And how are you guys in power going to know that person, really know her, if she's not traveling on the road with you anymore alone, not having dinner with you anymore? And I understand why you wouldn't do that. It's too vulnerable, particularly right now. So I think the initial part of this is a negative for women potentially for jobs at the top. I think that's a real problem.
I have some stats for you.
Why would I know that?
Here we go.
So,
Just don't link me to exploitation of actresses.
I won't. You're right.
I'm not
You're
in
right.
favor of that.
But it is really interesting. So, on your comment, right now, men are 3.5 times less likely to eat with a junior female.
That's a problem.
Men are 5 times less likely to travel with a junior female. Men, in general, men of all race, are 30% more uncomfortable meeting with a woman. Here's the kicker. 68% of Republican white men report being uncomfortable meeting with a woman as a result of the Me Too movement. And that's a problem, because if the leadership of a corporation doesn't spend time with its people, and if its people are 50.8% women, you're never going to get up the mountain. There's no way up the mountain if we don't share and if we don't work together. And I think what's important, as leaders, we have to realize our job is being comfortable, being uncomfortable. That's our job. And this journey we're on is going to be uncomfortable for the white men for a long time. We're actually not, at our current rate of trajectory of income parity, you're not going to reach equality for 217 years. And if you live in Texas, it's 300 years, all right? That sucks, all right? That's not good, right? So this battle is going to go on for a long time. So we all have to sort of chill out. It's sort of polarized right now, and I think the movement may have been part of that. It certainly did some incredible things, but one of the downsides is the polarization, and we have to bring that polarization back. Men cannot be afraid to work with their female colleagues. We will never get to the same place if that's the case.
I think someone mentioned it earlier that this is a very complicated topic. Not clearly something you cannot fit into an hour and a half conversation, something that the conversation obviously is something that has to continue onward. And just as we wrap things up, I know there was a lot of questions that came in because there's a lot of interest in this question, in women's role in the workplace in general, and those leadership topics that we were talking about earlier and how to do advancement. And so, I know we didn't get to as many of them as we would like, but I definitely did not want to cut the conversation short to move around on topics because I think this was just fascinating to listen to your opinions about how they are. Just to wrap up, I did want to go ahead and pitch one question from Colleen at table 27. In the interest of time, I'll just go ahead and read it from up here, and maybe you can each just very quickly mention an example from your organization. But she was asking, what are you doing within your organizations to encourage and promote the advancement of women into leadership roles? So just as a way to end cap our discussion, is there something formal or is it informal that you're doing within your groups?
I'll actually answer for the school instead of for the Glow Academy, because these girls are in generational poverty, and I'm going to pitch this for 2 seconds here, and the school is designed to get them to college and get them out of it. And what we are teaching them and what I watch them do, which is so amazing, is to believe in themselves and to believe that they really can change the world. And it's an amazing thing to watch. And if we can do that with young women of all color, races, wherever, if we can do that with young women, wow, it seems to me that goes a long way toward correcting a lot of the things 10 years from now that we're talking about today.
Right. Brett, is there something, what do you do at Castle Branch to encourage?
So what we do is we're entrepreneurs, and the entrepreneurial world is very different. It's not 80-20. It is 57% white men and 40% women. 40% of the new entrepreneurs in our world are women in the United States, which is fantastic. And I think it's a bright light of hope. Entrepreneurship is a way for women to pull the mountain out of the ground as opposed to trying to make old mountains change. You can create new mountains. And Castle Branch is a reflection of that. Our makeup, Castle Branch is 66% female. Of our leadership, we are 70% female, which is significant. It's tremendous. But it comes out of a culture of entrepreneurship and inclusion. So that's what we've done and what we will continue to do.
Wanda?
So we don't have a formal program for women in leadership. We just hired a chief people officer to help fill that gap, which I'm really excited about. And I'm also very excited to say that the majority of the women on our senior leadership team are women. So I think it certainly sets the tone for our organization to encourage other women to seek leadership positions within our organization. We only had one man for a very long time, which happened to be Wayne. And then over the last few years, we've hired, I think, 3 more men onto our senior leadership team. So I really want to continue to promote that. I'm participate in WILMA, and it's very important to promote women not only in leadership positions, but just in the workplace in general. So with our chief people officer coming on board, we realize that that's a gap for us, that we intend to develop leadership tracks for women and men within our organization.
At PPD, we're similar in terms of the backdrop of the company. Since we're in life sciences, we tend to have a overall population that's roughly 50-50 men and women. However, when you get up into the managerial ranks, up to executive director, the numbers start to go down to about 46% women. And at the VP level, about 44%. Then when you get into the top cohort of senior vice president and above, it's about a third or 30%, so there's a drop off. Then you get my direct reports, and it's about 25%. So what we're doing is, I don't have a, I don't look at things through a gender lens or an ethnicity lens. I look at it through a lens of what are we trying to do in the company, how do we advance that agenda. But the numbers would suggest that the population of talent in the company should be filtering up, unless there's some causality I don't see, where the numbers are more equal to the 50-50 type realm all the way to the top. Hence how are we picking slates of candidates? Can we have a policy that's an outside mechanism and the slate of candidates not just coming from the hiring manager, and then how do we evaluate those? And I think over time that will have an impact. It had an impact in other places that have put that in. The other thing we do is, again, it's not gender specific, but it's we're trying to fine-tune our process for identifying leadership potential for multiple layers beyond where a colleague is at a point in time in their career. So can we project who's going to replace me and the C-suite and SVP level of the company if we roll forward a decade? And then who are the folks that we think are the highest probability of navigating career development to be the best and be better than us when we're replaced. And as we do that, we are allocating disproportionate amounts of development money towards that targeted population. I'd say the makeup of that high potential, and I'm putting high potential because not everybody, we tag people and then we give them tests and move them into different roles, and it's not always successful. Some Achilles heel is exposed that we hadn't seen in the first round, so we got to get a little bit better in this. But of that population that's going forward, that population of high pose does reflect a more balanced mix of the company. I think it's actually slightly overweighted to women, but it's slight. It's still about 50-50.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your candor and your willingness to tackle some, like as you said, very complicated subjects. I know there's a lot of great questions that were out there. I would encourage you guys to use our Ask Wilma hashtag on our social media, Facebook, Twitter. Continue asking those questions. We're going to continue covering them in Wilma and as part of the leadership initiative. And for you guys, normally for our speakers, we give a business book or reading assignment as our thank you gift. We're doing something a little bit different this time. As you guys know, Judy for Glow every year brings in a Food Network personality and had Guy in this year. And you'll start to see those episodes are coming out now. Fork and Cork was one of the restaurants, I believe, that they were in. So our thank you gift for spending your lunchtime with us is a lunch certificate to Fork and Cork.
Oh, nice, great, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Great,
so,
perfect.
just applause for Jim Doss. So yeah, our challenge might be, take a woman from your organization out for a power lunch, or maybe someone that we've met here. Continue the conversation.
With my
Continue
assistant.
the statistics, yes, please. And to everybody else, the workshops and seminars, they start at 2 o'clock. They'll be over on the Nut Side Street in that concourse. And then we have our networking event this evening as well. I hope you guys all learned a lot, take something away, and continue the conversation amongst yourselves. Thank you very much.